Happy Halloween! I am the political checkmate, and I am dressed as Jonathan Joestar from JoJo Bizarre Adventures for Halloween. And today, I am Hamon Checkmating Robert Reich's video called Zombie Myths, the Economic Lies That Just Won't Die. So here we go.
Zombies can be a real problem. But what's even more annoying than actual undead corpses stumbling through the streets to devour the living are zombie myths, falsehoods. They keep crawling back no matter how many times they're laid to rest. These are the three zombie myths that eat at me the most.
Yeah, I get that feeling. No matter how many times these economic arguments keep getting debunked, they still rise, such as inflation being the result of corporations, even though the overwhelming majority of economists from an IGM survey does not think so, and a Federal Reserve paper debunking that argument. Another argument would be that socialism would work, even though the economic calculation problem has debunked that argument. Finally, without a minimum wage, everyone would make less than $2, even though minimum wage workers represent less than 2% of the workforce. I would go on, but let's see what Reich has to say.
Number one, the myth of trickle-down economics.
In the most sweeping overhaul of tax code in our nation's history.
But it's the largest tax cut in the history of our country.
Every time I think we finally buried this debunked, stinking corpse of an idea, it rises from the grave. Conservatives still claim tax cuts for the rich are the best thing for the economy because the rich are supposedly job creators. They keep trying this, yet it never works. Trump promised his tax cuts for the rich would lead to $4,000 annual raises for workers. It didn't happen. After Reagan's tax cuts for the rich, middle-class wage growth slowed to a lifeless crawl. And the Bush tax cuts for the rich didn't trickle down either. It doesn't take a lot of to see why trickle-down economics doesn't work. It's because the rich aren't the real job creators. Middle-class Americans are. Consumer spending is nearly 70% of the economy. So the economy does better when more people have more money to spend.
Economist Thomas Sowell points out that no economist has ever talked about trickle-down economics. What trickle-down economics is just a strawman against free markets. Anyway, on the Trump tax cuts, we need to look at the trend of where the wage growth is going, and if we do, we can see the earnings rose for all employees after tax cuts were implemented, more than where the previous trend line was going. While if we look at real median household income, we see $1,000 growth, while with the Reagan tax cut before Reagan came in, the average American was having issues with inflation, and when Reagan came in and did free market reforms, inflation reversed and improved economic growth and increased wages. In this book, by Power of Capitalism by Rainer Siedelman, covers Reagan's economic policies well. Also, tax cuts are like medicine, where they're generally helpful with problems, but if the medicine was made wrongly and didn't work, so with the Bush tax cuts, according to the Mercatus Center, they were theoretically flawed because they were phased slowly and expired quickly and focused inorderly on boosting aggregate demand, and finally with massive spending increases. On the argument of consumer spending being 70% of the economy, a Forbes article debunks that argument by pointing out that the retail sector contributes 6% of the economy, and the figure is combining spending by businesses and investments. I want to quote this Forbes argument. As John Stuart Mill put it 2 centuries ago, the demand for commodities is not the demand for labor. Consumers' demand does not necessarily translate into increased employment. That's because consumers don't employ people, businesses do, since new hires are risky and costly investment with unknown future returns. What drives the economy is not just simply consuming goods, but also production of those goods through savings and investments.
Number two, the myth of the free market.
The best way to build is to have the free market do it.
Whenever lawmakers try to protect the public by putting limits on the power of corporations in the private sector, conservatives summon this zombie myth from the grave. They claim government regulations will interfere with the natural free market. But there's no free market in nature. Notice how you've never seen a National Geographic special about the free market? The market cannot exist without a government to organize and enforce it. The question isn't whether the government will get involved in the market, but how and whose interests will be protected. The rich want to rig the rules of the market in their favor, which is why they keep reviving this decrepit argument.
The free market is natural because the free market is just voluntary trading with individuals. We can see this in nature with male spiders giving female spiders gifts in exchange for mating. Anyway, what proponents of free markets means by free market is that it's better for the private sector to do things like create jobs or lower prices. There are stateless societies that have free markets, such as the Acadians, who made trade with natives and having a peaceful and prosperous society. While protection of consumers is better done by the market because the government doing regulations results in monopolies because of regulatory capture.
Number 3, the myth that the rich got rich all by themselves.
A media legend and self-made billionaire.
To a self-made CEO billionaire.
I started off in Brooklyn. My father gave me a small loan of $1 million.
This is one of the oldest tales from the crypt. But the biggest predictor of somebody's future income and wealth is the income and wealth of the family they're born into. About 60% of all wealth in America is inherited. On top of that, rich Americans' incomes are made possible by taxpayer-funded infrastructure, education, scientific research, and national security, as well as by corporate subsidies and tax loopholes, and most importantly, by the sweat of average.
The Tax Foundation has debunked that figure, and a survey has found that nearly 68% of rich people are self-made, and another survey found that 90% of rich families lose their wealth in 3 generations. Anyway, the private sector can do infrastructure and education, and many companies do their own scientific research. Economist Robert Murphy wrote about how the private sector could do the military. The historian Burton Fossum book, The Myth of the Robber Barons, point out how the market entrepreneurs like Vanderbilt and James Hill got rich without subsidies. Also, taxes are just stealing people's hard-earned money, so dodging it is just basically keeping your own money. On the workers' argument, I want to use this analogy to debunk your argument. Let's say a baker buys flour and eggs and milk from different farmers. The bakers compensate the farmers on a price they both agree on, and the baker produces a cake out of the ingredients. The baker sells the cake more than the cost. The baker earns a profit. Does the baker have a right to keep the profit, since he compensated the people he did businesses with no matter if he earned money or not on the cake? This is the end of the video. Thank you for watching, and please donate to my Patreon so I can make more videos and have your video requests checkmated. And thanks for watching, and have a nice day.